Venvi Art Gallery is pleased to present Beyond the Lost Garden, Mark Messersmith's fourth solo exhibition with our gallery. This exhibit showcases 30 works of art from painting to sculpture and the wonderful blend of the two. Mark Messersmith creates stunningly beautiful and vibrant paintings depicting North Florida's flora and fauna. Through intricate layering of color and subject matter, Messersmith gives viewers a seemingly endless scenery to explore the dense, tangled, and fragile natural world as it and its inhabitants desperately try to survive. And with that, we hope you enjoy. Welcome to our latest installment of our Artist Talk series. Joining us today, we have Mark Messersmith, and we will be getting some insight on our current show, Beyond the Lost Garden. Hello, Mark. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Angelica. It's nice to be here. Looking forward to your questions.
So jumping in, the title of the show is called Beyond the Lost Garden. Can you tell us about your choice in title and how it relates to the work you decided to include in this show?
Well, the last show title anyway, was based on this idea of this Greek myth of this magical garden for them in the far west, which was probably somewhere maybe in the Atlas Mountains or Portugal.
Mm-hmm.
And it was across the ocean again, which for them was probably the Mediterranean.
Mm-hmm.
And in this garden, it was protected by 3 nymphs, and they were the nymphs of the evening. So there's something kind of romantic about that, the nymphs of the evening in the twilight. And in this garden was this orchard of apples, and they were golden apples. So they were there to tend the garden, and to protect the garden was a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the idea of this mythical garden in the West. And at one point, some scholars thought that golden apple was really actually an orange.
Mm.
But really, oranges didn't make it into Europe until the Middle Ages. So, the Greeks probably weren't aware of oranges. But I sort of like that interpretation of the golden apple as an orange.
Yeah.
And this magical garden in the far west, protected by a dragon.
Mm-hmm.
So it seemed like kind of a natural inclination to just extend that to farther west, across the Atlantic, to Florida, to this land of a beautiful garden, which eventually had oranges and was protected by dragons, these alligators. So I sort of like, that's the interesting thing about a lot of those myths. They're so intertangled and so open to interpretations. I thought, well, I can just build on that idea of this magical garden.
Yeah.
And protected by dragons. And the perhaps sad point that we're at right now, where that mystery of that peaceful garden is kind of on the cusp of disappearing, if it hasn't already. So everybody needs a title for a show, and it just happened. It wasn't like I started thinking about, I need a title for a show.
Yeah.
They sort of evolved simultaneously, the title of the show and the nature and the relationship to the work.
Very cool. So we see with a lot of the work you have included in this exhibit that the canvases are accompanied with wood carving adornments, predella boxes, or a combination of the two like we have here. How did these elements come about and evolve over the course of your career?
Originally, I was interested in altarpieces. I had no particular church interest, but I like the format of the large painting, and then a smaller series of paintings underneath that elaborate, tell a little bit more about that story and kind of a timeline. So I started originally painting those predellas across the actual surface of the painting, and then eventually they evolved into the shadow boxes attached to the painting. And then I got kind of tired of doing those after 30 years. And then I started taking the sculptural forms and attaching them in sort of a predella format underneath the painting. And partly it makes it a lot easier to move the paintings because they're a lot less heavy.
As much
because these are removable.
Yeah.
And the shadow boxes weren't. So I've been doing these for the last 5-6 years. I kind of lose track, and then I flip-flop once while going back to the shadow boxes.
Talking more about the predella boxes, is there a narrative in the predella boxes and wood carvings that accompany your canvases?
Well, with the boxes underneath, there is a bit of a narrative line reading from left to right. And in most cases, that storyline gets a little progressively darker or more fatalistic as you get to the right. The left usually starts fairly naturalistic or idealistic or romantic. This is a painting I did of a Martin Johnson Heat painting, and the kind of romanticized idea of the landscape. He would paint orchids, and he'd paint butterflies in this tropical rainforest, none of which were indigenous to each other. But he didn't care. It was all about the feeling of this natural world in a kind of romantic vision. So I sort of like that, and that's kind of how it started on the left, and then it gets progressively darker as you get over to the far right. And the final panel on the left is a little painted version I did of Bruegel's Ship of Fools, which is kind of about the simpleness, the shallowness, the sort of pointlessness of a lot of human endeavors. And that's kind of a general theme in most of the paintings, I guess, at that point. People usually up to something that is maybe self-serving or at the expense of other animals or the environment.
Yeah.
So I guess essentially everybody's kind of on board with the Ship of Fools.
Oh, very interesting. I didn't pick up on that at first. Now when I get to go through the gallery again, I'll definitely be able to look at it with
for the next
a new eye.
2 days.
For the next 2 days, yeah.
You get to explain to all the people.
And many people have asked too if there was something, and I was like, I said that I'm sure there's a narrative, but I wasn't exactly sure which the narratives were.
That's the thing about painting. That's different than illustration. You want to ask, as a painter, you want to ask questions. You don't want to explain things. So, the fact that you have insight that could, decode some stuff, or anybody else could come in and decode things, find familiar points of reference. They're not going to be out in a different ballpark. They're all going to be more or less in the same range of interpretations, which I like.
Yeah.
I don't want everybody to think exactly like me. At some point, they all should, but but that would make kind of a small, little, narrow world. But I want people to at least maybe pause and think about maybe some of the things that I think about. I'm not trying to convert them, but I think the paintings are accessible enough in terms of subject matter. Oh, I know what that is. I know what that is. Now I have to figure out what they have to do with each other.
Yeah, gotcha.
And they're all things that I like. I like the animals. I like the birds. I like the locations, and they're all essentially made up. I mean, they're rough stylizations of birds, like an anhinga or a swallow-tailed kite or a night heron. But I'm not trying to be an ornithologist or a scientist or an illustrator. So I feel perfectly comfortable taking whatever liberties with those things.
Yeah. Awesome. So this work is titled We're Moon, and you title your work in such intriguing ways. Can you give us a little insight on how you title your work and what Worm Moon might mean in this instance?
Well, title is always tricky, at least for me. Again, it's not like a descriptive title.
Yeah.
I don't want to describe things. I don't want to seem like the painting is an illustration for a title. So I spend a little bit, not a great deal of time or effort coming up with titles. And this one, kind of cryptically enough, is called Worm Moon, which people don't know. What does that mean? But really, every year, every full moon, every month, there's a term for that moon, whether it's wolf moon, snow moon, fox moon. So the worm moon was the one for March. So that's when the painting was done. So worm moon, that's a good enough title for a painting done in March with a full moon in it.
Yeah.
So, in a way, it's a bit like all the paintings. They seem perhaps complex when you look at it or listen to a title. then when you hear the explanation, you go, oh, that makes sense. It's not so cryptic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For some reason, I thought maybe it would have something with it just fits so well with the Luna moths as well, because Luna is another term for moon. So I thought War Moon was such a fitting title for this work.
Well, I like certain creatures, so like right in here, I don't know, 2 of the paintings have Luna moths in them. So I like these cast of characters that I kind of enjoy reusing.
Yeah.
Partly because of the kind of magic they have. When you see a Luna moth, you always remember it. And something about the color, and, the Renaissance painters, they would paint angels flying in the air.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in painting angels. So I use things like birds and moths for, getting that space kind of levitated. And I like the idea of the Luna moths with these eye spots. So they're kind of benign, but at the same time they're watching all the things that are going on that we are doing to their world. So, these are all ideas that kind of run through my head. They're not heavy, specific notions that I'm striving to convey.
Yeah.
It's just like, there must be some reason why I like the Luna moths.
Yeah.
Or other things, and it's probably neither here nor there in terms of the paintings, but in terms of me as a catalyst, I sort of enjoy certain creatures.
Definitely. Oh, wow. And that gives you a whole nother view on the works as well when you go through them and see, because this is the one part of the gallery that has the least amount of Luna moths. All the rest all have them in the front and on our other side with the 4x4 works. But yeah, looking at them once again, it's gonna have a different feel each time. Wow.
Well, I think that's probably what artists strive for. Is that
Definitely.
everybody gets a different feeling every time. So I'm glad to hear your insightful willingness to have to go back
Do
over.
rounds.
Yeah, I get it over and over again.
Yeah, every time visitors come in, they'll either ask me a question about something. Someone specifically asked about War Moon, the title of it, or they'll give me their own thoughts on it.
Which
and
I'm
then,
sure you're interested in.
Yeah, as they're walking out, they always give me their visions and what they interpret, and I'm always fascinated by it because I go around and I think through their perception of it, and it's always intriguing each time.
Those people plant those seeds in your head, and it's hard to sort of delete them. Yeah. Like I always remember some guy was explaining my fascination with these anhingas. Is that plural? Anhingas. Anhingas, they swim in the water to catch fish, and they don't have oil glands, so they have to stand out on these logs and let the water drip off their wings. So they usually stare out in the sun. But in this case, he happens to be staring at the moon. So the idea of this bird standing there, staring at the sun with his wings outstretched, he interpreted it as my quest for some kind of spiritual discovery, looking for the God. So in his mind, I am the Anahinga. That's crazy, but I like it.
Yeah.
It's got absolutely nothing to do with me, probably way more to do with him. But at least he was trying to read into it, and really that's what the paintings are about, is what I'm adding to the conversation, what the painting is adding to the conversation, and what the viewer is adding to the conversation.
Yeah. Oh, that's great.
So, but that's not me.
You heard it here now.
Yeah, take note.
Oh, that's awesome. So moving around the gallery, we see a lot of reoccurring symbols in your work. Other reoccurring symbols in your work, other than dogs, such as food chain activities unfolding, advertisements, log trucks, magnolias. What can you tell us about these symbols, their significance, and are there even more reoccurring things that viewers could keep an eye out for when they come see your show?
Well, you're right. There are a lot of things that kind of make guest appearances in the paintings over and over again. And partly it's because the paintings are kind of about things and places that I've experienced for the most part, or at least that I'm interested in. So that's this area in North Florida, and this cusp or boundary between relative areas of wilderness and human activities. So there's always an element of that balance in the paintings. Certainly some things are looking back to like maybe a romantic vision, like again the artist Martin Johnson, these are real, or not real, I mean they're repainted of some of his paintings of these sort of idyllic Florida landscapes. So with the real world more or less going on, there's still these banners in my mind of how Florida used to be. So I enjoy that element of looking back, not necessarily nostalgic, because they knew the world was changing when he was painting these. But again, maybe that idea of that magical garden in the far west, how it was, and maybe how it's not anymore. So certainly references from Martin Johnson Heath's landscapes, his fixation with magnolia blossoms, and the specifics of that sort of being southern U.S. flower, kind of like a symbol, along with the alligator, which is again maybe that dragon that's protecting this beautiful naturalistic landscape. And fire is another element that I keep using, partly for its sort of theatrical effect of being an interesting light source or a color source in the painting. But fire has an interesting double reading for a lot of people. Some people see it as kind of destructive force. Some people see it as renewal. It gets rid of the old and allows the new to take its place. So in this case, it's coming out of the hood of a car. In some cases, it's referencing clear burns, control burns in the forest. There's an element of mystery to that. If you ever seen one of those at night, it's dark and you see these flames flickering out in the landscape. So I sort of, use symbols, maybe not unknowingly, but sometimes they're there just for props, either to reflect the light, catch light, or cause a light source. And the logging trucks, I probably couldn't find a painting without a logging truck to some degree. So, again, it's that idea of them being out there affecting the landscape in a way that affects the animals, but also affects us, because we need those products, so we can't really ever claim we're sort of not in cahoots with the disappearing landscape. And the billboards, they're always sort of referencing romanticized, twisted versions of Florida highways, the old back roads with the billboards about fruit stands and stuff like that. Though mine evolved from fruit crate labels from Florida. And it was interesting, a lot of fruit crates, that were used either depicted young women holding up delicious drippy fruit, or interesting young black African American boys just enjoying the food or doing something even more socially unsettling, caricatures. So, it's the idea of this world is still out there once you get a little off the highway, whether it's good or bad, it's still out there. And a lot of references for, in this case, John Audubon, studying the birds. And this one is specifically related to the ivory-billed woodpecker. So there's an ivory-billed woodpecker in that painting. And it's one of those motifs that I repeat a lot. And the woodpecker is always wired to the tree. Because the ivory-billed woodpecker was really depending on the old growth forest, and when they were all gone, and the woodpecker, essentially went extinct. So the idea that he can't escape. So these are all twisted ideas that I kind of replay over in my head, and bring out the Irish billed pepper, and it's time to stick him up on the tree.
Yeah. There's a spot on the tree just for him.
But he can't get away.
Yeah. Oh.
No. And in the background, there's always, not always, but a lot of times there's some element of civilization encroaching.
I'll be keeping an eye out for my next round.
Yeah, one more explanation. Let me tell you about this. And this one again is it's a simpler predella across the bottom. A lot of times with the carvings, they're not as narratively ordered as the boxes are. This is just referencing specific elements in the painting, the birds and the sort of idealized can of tomatoes that seem particularly generic, but at the same time really kind of specific about not being contemporary. It's not like a contemporary tomato can for whatever reason.
Yeah. Wow.
The carvings, are kind of my interest in folk art, particularly carvings, sculpture. I'm not too interested in folk art, two-dimensional painting, but I like three-dimensional, naive carvings. So it's an opportunity to make these relatively simple things, just saw them out, paint them, and put some glitter on them, and I kind of enjoy doing that. I don't really think of myself particularly as a sculptor, but I enjoy making these either thick paintings or flat sculpture.
Yeah. So another symbol are dogs, and in this painting we only see one, but everyone comments on the dogs. Oh, I didn't even see him before. Okay.
They're in there too.
You see more things every time. So, everyone asks or comments about the dogs and their depictions. Would you be able to share your thoughts on the dogs as a reoccurring symbol and how you depict them?
Yeah, dogs are domesticated animals, obviously, and in my paintings, they're always kind of doing the ill deeds that the humans are doing as well.
Yeah, gotcha.
So the dogs are always in cahoots, they've all had collars on. I'll usually have some chain or something that get broken free. And they're usually just running through the landscape in parallel to whatever the humans are doing, sort of just, raising havoc. They're not like the birds or the bobcat or the alligator.
Yeah.
There's a little sort of intermediary thing going on between the humans and the rest of the animals, and then this dog element, which could go either way, I guess, left to its own devices.
Yeah, and I think when people are looking at the canvases, they really see that difference in the dogs and the other animals in the environments and how they're interacting with one another and just existing in that space, for sure.
Yeah, because other animals, even though they might be eating each other, it's not out of maliciousness. There's no malice.
Yeah,
it's just
a cycle of
what
life.
they do.
Yeah,
and something about the dogs. There's a little bit more intention. It's not benign.
Yeah.
They're there for their teeth.
Yeah. Their teeth, we see their teeth very out in this work, titled The Edge of Town. We also see this parade of sorts occurring past the burning car. Can you tell us more about the scene unraveling in this one?
Yeah, when I started painting, a lot of times I don't really know what the story is going to be, or the narrative, or really much about it. I might have one idea, like, I'm assuming maybe the idea was, well, I'm going to put this alligator on top of a car, and on top of it will be a deer, and on top of that will be a bird, and they're all being dragged out somewhere.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm just trying to remember. That might have been like my initial idea. So, okay, I can do that. And then the rest of the painting just starts falling into place, coming up with its own narrative. And major elements start at first, and then smaller elements in the painting start to fill in and maybe add to the story.
Yeah.
And this one has the friendly familiar log truck in it, going right through town, like you get outside of town. Here in smaller towns, you always see the log trucks. And the dogs, and those are not your pet dogs. And these are not your friends. I mean, this crazy drunk driver and skeleton guy and stylized torso of probably the devil. But in the back is the artist. So, again, I'm not trying to separate myself from that world or be above that world or even be judgmental of that world. I'm part of that world, for better and probably worse. So, all those sort of lines don't sit in my head when I start a painting. They just kind of evolve as the process takes place. And again, a lot of things I enjoy painting are the birds, so I always find a place to put them. In some cases, even the same bird. It's like from a little piece of photo from like a Autobahn magazine or something like that. So I get certain gestures, certain birds, certain elements that I like, and I'm not afraid to repeat them over and over again. Literally, this is the same bird, so I just repeated him 3 times.
And the fire illuminates him beautifully too.
Like again, the fire as a light source and as a threatening element. It's kind of like a landscape of a nightmare. These weird sort of like Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade, but
that's how I described him to someone too.
So that's good. Except maybe they're more like from Halloween Macy's Day parade or something, because they're sort of a strange figure on top of a ram, and sort of a devil floating back here, another devil floating up here. So it's not it's not your happy world of Christmas. And they don't do those things at night. So there's something about that world that flip-flops between the good and bad, optimistic, pessimistic, that I'm sort of interested in. And these cities that just kind of go on forever. And the narrative across the bottom of this one is maybe a little bit more. None of them are very specific, but they do tend to be a little bit more linear in terms of optimistic to fatalistic on the one side.
Wow. Finishing up our artist talk, we are coming to the last portions of work you included in the show, which are 2 sculptures titled Fire Bear and Bobcat. Each sculpture has 2 sides with unique scenes. What inspired the creation of these sculptures and moving onto both sides of the wood carvings?
That's a good questions, and they're really logical questions, and sometimes I don't really have particularly logical explanations for it. Then maybe I thought it would be fun, or I would like to do it and try it.
Awesome.
And if I do something and I like it well enough, again, just by my own judgment, I might do more of them. So I've done, 6, 7 of these 2-sided sculptures. And they're all, again, basically animals that I'm familiar with, in this case the bobcat, and he's derived almost identically to the bobcat up there in terms of the pose. And that's derived from an Audubon image of he did a series of North American mammals. So he did a depiction of a bobcat. I sort of like the awkward gesture that Audubon uses a lot of times. So the gesture is similar to that. Again, maybe there's the element of folk art once you start using glitter and pieces of mirror. I sort of enjoy that. There's not necessarily maybe the formal baggage that you have when you start talking about sculpture or painting with these. They're more like, I don't know, they're in their own sort of vocabulary. And I sort of enjoy that. So it's a funny excuse for most cases I paint animals on the painting. In this case, I do the painting on the animal. And I'm sure it's difficult sometimes to pick out the original animal and kind of lose its face. But I'm kind of okay with that. I like the process of maybe somebody discovering the animal while they're looking at what they might think is just kind of a weirdly shaped painting.
Yeah. And what can you tell us about the opposing side, which is the night version of this
I'll
day?
flip it over.
Oh, awesome.
God, this is so unrehearsed. So I kind of do a night side and a dark side, and there's not a judgment on good or bad. Day is good, night is bad, or something like that going on. It's just the creatures that inhabit those times of day. So in this case, it's the Luna moth, another silk moth, giant silk moth. So it's just an opportunity to take creatures from different times and incorporate them into paintings.
Cool. One world, just two different sides.
Yeah, like the way everything is.
Yeah.
There's again, two sides, not necessarily making judgments on either one. It'd be easy to say, oh, the good side is the day side and the nighttime is the bad side. But, that's a kind of narrow perspective.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us about your work and giving us more information and more things to look out for. We are super pleased to have your work fill our gallery space.
It's my pleasure. I enjoy your questions. You're a fun interviewer. And I want to thank Venvi for the opportunity to show in their gallery. And it's always been a delightful experience.
All the work shown and discussed in this video is available for purchase both in the gallery and online, and we offer free shipping in the continental US. Thank you for watching. Roll credits.